never thought much about my coworkers. For the most part, everyone at St. Aldridge Regional Payroll was predictable, quiet, the kind of office where you didn't need to lock your drawer because nothing of real value ever went missing. That's why when Melissa started, I didn't think twice. She was assigned to sit behind me in a cubicle, supposedly to shadow payroll processes. HR introduced her quickly, like they'd been forced to get someone on the floor immediately. She said hello, nodded once, and sat down. She didn't ask questions, didn't make small talk, just opened her laptop and typed. Her typing was precise, quiet, deliberate. Too deliberate. At first I thought it was a good habit, but it became something else. A rhythm that made me notice her more than I wanted. It started subtle. She knew things she shouldn't have. On my first day with her assigned, she said, "You leave at 4:30 today." I laughed. "Yeah, most days." "How do you know?" She tilted her head. "Different shoes today. You walk faster on Wednesdays." I froze. How could she know that? I had mentioned it in passing to no one, and she had no reason to be watching me, at least so closely. That was the first time I noticed her gaze. She didn't stare in an obvious way. She wasn't creepy. She was just always aware. A presence at the periphery, calculating, silent. The anomalies multiplied. She knew which forms I'd already processed before I opened them. She could tell when payroll batches would require corrections before we ran reports. She knew everyone else's routine, who went to the bathroom at what time, who used the stairs instead of the elevator, even which coffee mugs people used most often. I started writing it off. She was new. Maybe she paid attention. Maybe she had an exceptional memory. But it didn't feel like memory. It felt like access. Then my car wouldn't start. The first Wednesday the battery was dead. I had parked in my usual spot. Cold, early morning. Nothing obvious. I shrugged. Bad battery. The second Wednesday the same thing happened. Only this time I noticed the hood was slightly warm, like someone had opened it recently. By the third week I was uneasy. The pattern was too precise. The days, the times, the way Melissa always seemed to know. One afternoon, Melissa leaned over my cubicle wall and said, "You park farther away on Wednesdays." I tried to joke. "Yeah, street cleaning. You have a map." She didn't laugh. "Different shoes. You walk longer." "I know." Her voice wasn't threatening, but the certainty, too sharp, too precise, sent a shiver down my spine. That evening, I checked the parking lot cameras from my office. Nothing. Empty. No one near my car except someone standing there for a few minutes, but the angle wasn't clear. I couldn't tell who. I mentioned it to the supervisor. She shrugged. "People wander sometimes." That was the first time I realized no one was checking the cameras like I was. No one cared enough. By the fourth week, small things began to happen. My office phone would be slightly moved, never unplugged. Documents misplaced, then found in folders I hadn't touched. Emails would be marked read before I opened them. Melissa didn't respond to questions. She never explained. She simply observed, recorded, acted. I started checking logs. Badge access logs showed she had entered restricted areas. Facilities storage. Server rooms. Break rooms she had no reason to visit. Computer login logs indicated she accessed payroll files she wasn't assigned to. System timestamps didn't lie. Her activity sometimes occurred when she wasn't physically in the office. I took screenshots, saved logs, emailed HR. Their response? Investigating. No anomalies found. They never asked for my security footage. They never followed up. The fourth Wednesday, I arrived at work early. Parked close. Hood slightly ajar. Battery dead. I called maintenance. They arrived, looked at the car, said it was fine. Nothing wrong. No signs of tampering. Later, I checked the archived parking lot cameras myself. Someone was standing behind my car that night for nearly 4 minutes. Nobody moved. Nobody touched the vehicle. I couldn't tell who, but I recognized the posture. Melissa. I didn't want to believe it. Maybe a coincidence. Maybe the angle made her figure look like her. But my stomach twisted. That certainty again. I started staying late. Not because of work. Because I needed to see her. She would be at her desk, laptop open, screen blank. But her presence felt heavier. Watching. Calculating. Sometimes I caught movement out of the corner of my eye. Shadows in the fluorescent glow. Clicking sounds when no one else was in the office. Whispered syllables that didn't belong to anyone in the room. I checked the intercom. Nothing. Security cameras. Nothing unusual, but the feeling persisted. HR finally informed us Melissa's employment was terminated. Supposedly, she never passed background verification. No employment history, no social security, no references. Her cubicle cleared. No personal items. Empty as though she'd never been there. But the digital traces remained. System access logs still showed her account logging in, moving files, opening emails. Badge access still registered as active. Security cameras sometimes caught movement in the area she had been assigned. Figures standing silently, then gone. No one else reported it. No one else seemed to notice. 2 months later, an email from security went out to all employees. Reminder: former employees are not permitted inside the facility. If you see anyone without a valid badge, notify security immediately. Attached was a still image from the parking lot cameras. There she was, behind my car. Timestamp, last week. I forwarded it to HR. Their reply: timestamp error. No anomaly detected. I quit 2 weeks later. On my last day, I cleared out my cubicle, turned in my badge. As I walked out, the elevator doors started closing. They stopped. Someone badged in from outside. Doors stayed open. No one entered. After a few seconds, the doors closed. When I checked the access logs later, one badge had been scanned at that exact time. Melissa's. Still active. Still inside.
I had been working night shifts at the accounting department for almost 6 months when the first anomaly happened. It was a Tuesday. I usually arrived at 8 p.m., slipped past the quiet elevators and settled in with my laptop before the office emptied completely. That night, everything seemed normal. Fluorescent lights humming, soft click of keys, the faint whir of the HVAC. I sat at my desk, reviewing payroll spreadsheets, when I noticed a message pop up in the shared folder. Double-check Q3. Something's off. I frowned. No one had sent it. The system automatically tracks edits, and the message wasn't logged to any employee. I assumed it was a glitch. Nothing serious. Over the next week, these little things multiplied. Files I hadn't touched were marked red before I opened them. Spreadsheets I was working on were edited with minor corrections that made sense, but I hadn't authorized them. At first, I chalked it up to automated scripts or maybe a coworker tidying things up. But then I began noticing more personal touches, like someone knowing my schedule in ways no one could. By the second week, it became impossible to ignore. I would leave my desk for a bathroom break or coffee, and when I returned, documents would be rearranged in ways that only I would organize them. The placement wasn't random, it mirrored my thought process perfectly. Nothing else about the office changed, no lights, no other movement, but the files would be adjusted as if someone had been following me. Watching. Waiting. One night, around 11:45 p.m., I heard it first, a faint whisper from the empty hall outside my cubicle. I froze, convinced it was someone sneaking past. I called out, "Hello?" Nothing. Just the hum of fluorescent lights. I shook my head and returned to my laptop, trying to focus. Minutes later, my cursor moved on its own. Not a glitch, real, precise movements, scrolling through documents I hadn't opened, highlighting entire columns, entering numbers. My heart raced. I grabbed the mouse, but it stopped immediately. I checked the system logs. No one had logged in. No remote access was possible. I tried to convince myself I was imagining it. Stress, overwork, late-night isolation. But the incidents kept escalating. Emails would appear in my inbox, marked read, with brief notes typed in the same font I used. Phrases like, check totals again, or verify client accounts. The content always made sense, as if someone intimately familiar with my workflow was guiding me. But there was no sender. Then came the notes in my desk drawer. Folded, typed, precise. Never unsigned. Always in my handwriting. I knew I hadn't put them there. I stopped trusting anything around me. I began leaving subtle markers, sticky notes on the desk, pens in odd positions, files stacked in unconventional ways. By the next morning, they would be moved exactly how I would have placed them. The system confirmed that no one else had logged in, and security cameras showed no unusual presence. One night, I left the office briefly to smoke outside. When I returned, my badge wouldn't open the door. Security logs later showed it was used at 11:50 p.m., while I was outside. I reported it to IT. They said the logs might be delayed, but delays didn't explain the subtle manipulations in the spreadsheets, the notes, the emails. Someone had been in my account in the office without leaving evidence. The pattern intensified over the next few weeks. I would come in and find items slightly shifted on my desk, pens perfectly aligned, keyboard adjusted to my usual typing angle, papers reordered according to my mental workflow. It was meticulous, precise, disturbing. One night, I stayed until 2 a.m. determined to catch whoever it was. I stationed a camera discreetly under my monitor, aimed at my chair and desktop. Hours passed. I dozed briefly, half waking to the quiet clicks of the keyboard, soft, deliberate. But every time I blinked fully awake, no one was there. My chair hadn't moved. My computer screen was off. Yet the camera footage later revealed brief, blurred movements I couldn't identify. Nothing recognizable. Just shapes, shadows, shifting too fast to analyze. I stopped leaving my office alone. But the anomalies followed me home. Emails arrived with minor edits to work I hadn't yet finished. System logs showed access from the office network at odd hours when I knew no one else was there. I began noticing strange coincidences. The thermostat always adjusted before I arrived, lights flickered in the exact sequence I would use when walking the aisles of desks, even doors seemed to click in response to my presence. Eventually, I confronted IT formally. "Someone is in my account," I told them. "I don't know how, but they're here. They're in the office when no one is here." They looked at me blankly. "No one else is logged in. Nothing unusual on the system. Your account is secure. Maybe you're overworked." But I knew the difference between human error and deliberate observation. Whoever it was, they knew my habits, my workflow, my mental patterns. Then it escalated to direct encounters. Objects shifted in real time. Pens rolled from one end of the desk to another as I watched. A sticky note slid across the surface toward me as if pushed gently. A chair moved slightly even when I hadn't been touching it. One night, I heard the whisper again. Clearer this time. I froze mid-typing. It wasn't words. Just a breath, a faint hiss, coming from behind my cubicle. I spun around. Nothing. Silence. My pulse racing, I dared to step back into the hallway. The sound followed. Then stopped abruptly when I turned a corner. I began documenting everything obsessively. Timestamps, files touched, objects moved, sounds, even shadows. But nothing concrete ever appeared. Cameras showed no movement. Security logs confirmed no unauthorized entries. HR refused to escalate. They told me, "There's no record of anyone being here." Sleep became impossible. I started staying overnight more often, refusing to leave my office unattended. The longer I stayed, the more precise the movements became. A pen would roll perfectly to a position I hadn't intended. A spreadsheet would update as I watched, numbers correcting themselves automatically. Whoever, or whatever, it had intimate knowledge of my workflow, my habits, my schedule. On one particularly cold night, I stayed until 3 a.m. determined to catch it. I set up motion detectors, cameras, and left the office lights on. At exactly 2:42 a.m., I heard the softest movement behind my chair. I froze. Nothing happened in the room visible to me. Yet, the motion detector triggered for several seconds. I checked the live feed. Blurred shapes, indistinct, shifted behind the cubicle walls. The movement was too fast, precise, and fleeting to identify. By the end of that week, I was a shadow of myself. I couldn't eat properly, I barely slept, and I was constantly checking emails, logs, and cameras. I began to hear whispers from the vents and soft, deliberate taps on my desk that no one else acknowledged. Eventually, HR sent a termination notice for Melissa. They claimed she had failed background verification. No social security number. No references. No employment history. The cubicle was cleared immediately. But the digital traces remained. My account continued to show activity I didn't perform. Emails marked read. Files adjusted. Logs showing access during hours no one else was in the building. 2 months later, a security notice was sent to all employees. Former employees are not permitted inside the facility. If you see anyone without a valid badge, notify security immediately. Attached was a still from the parking lot cameras. Standing behind my car, Melissa. Timestamp, the previous week. I forwarded it to HR. Their reply, timestamp error. No anomaly detected. I quit 2 weeks later. On my last day, I cleared my desk, turned in my badge, and left the building. As I reached the elevator doors, they started closing, then stopped. Someone badged in from outside. The doors stayed open. No one entered. After a few seconds, they closed. When I checked the access logs later, one badge had been scanned at that exact time. Melissa's. Still active. Still inside. I haven't returned since. But I know even now that somewhere in that building, or in the system, she's still there, waiting, watching, moving exactly when I least expect it. I met him on a Tuesday, but no one could tell me when he started. That should have been the first warning. Our office handled insurance claims for a regional provider in the Midwest. Open floor plan. No windows near the center. The kind of place where time felt flattened, where days blended together under white light and the low hum of servers hidden somewhere behind locked doors. When I asked my supervisor who the new guy was, she said, IT temp. He's helping clean up legacy access issues. That made sense. We'd been migrating systems for months. Permissions were a mess. Old accounts, old contractors, forgotten credentials. It was annoying work. Necessary. The man sat 3 rows over from me. Neutral clothes. No company logo. No badge lanyard like the rest of us, just a clipped card turned inward. He never spoke unless spoken to. When he did, his answers were short, technical, polite. His name was Aaron. At least that's what he told me when I asked, "What team are you with?" I said, leaning back in my chair. "Temporary," he replied. "Right. I mean, reporting to who?" He paused like he needed to think. "Everyone," he said. I laughed, assuming it was a joke. "You didn't?" The first thing I noticed was that Aaron seemed to know things before they happened. Small things at first. He would stand up and walk toward the printer seconds before it jammed. He'd message someone to reset a password moments before they realized they were locked out. He once told me not to submit a claim yet because it would be flagged. It was flagged. I started paying attention. Aaron didn't type much. When he did, it was fast, efficient, then done. His screen was usually dark, like he preferred working in the background. But tasks assigned to IT temp, in the ticketing system, were always marked resolved. Sometimes before they were even opened. One afternoon, my computer locked itself. Not crashed. Not frozen. Locked. I tried my password. Incorrect. I tried again. Incorrect. Then a message appeared on the screen. "Give it a minute." I waited. The login prompt refreshed. My password worked. I turned around. Aaron was already looking at me. "Cached credentials," he said. "Happens." I thanked him, but my skin prickled. I hadn't submitted a ticket. I hadn't asked for help. He just intervened. That night, I checked my access history out of curiosity. We had a tool for auditing our own logins. Everything looked normal except for one thing. There was an admin-level access event tied to my account. Not from my login. From an internal override. Timestamped seconds before my screen locked. The user ID wasn't listed. Just a blank field. I tried to sleep it off. Over the next 2 weeks, Aaron became unavoidable. He knew when people were about to leave the company before HR announcements went out. He'd deactivate accounts quietly, sometimes days early. People would show up unable to log in, confused, angry, only to be pulled into meetings an hour later and escorted out. He always knew. I asked around about him. No one seemed to have clear answers. "He's with corporate," someone said. "I think he's a consultant," another guessed. HR had no record of him. Facilities didn't either. But his access worked everywhere. Doors, systems, cameras. One evening, I stayed late to finish a backlog of claims. The office emptied out around me. Lights dimmed automatically in sections where no one moved. I was alone, or so I thought. At 8:37 p.m., my email chimed. Subject: "You missed one." No sender name. Just an internal address that didn't resolve when I clicked it. The body contained a claim number. One I had skipped. I checked. It was legitimate. Needed correction. My hands were shaking now. I replied, "Who is this?" The response came instantly. "I already told you." I stood up, scanning the office. Aaron was still there, sitting in the darkened IT row, screen glowing faintly. I walked over. "Did you email me?" I asked. He looked up. "Yes." "From what address?" "The one you read," he said. "That address doesn't exist." He considered that. It does now. I backed away. The next day I went to HR. I told them everything. The access, the messages, the lack of records. They took notes, smiled politely, promised to look into it. Aaron was still there when I returned to my desk. He was smiling too. After that, things escalated quickly. My files were reorganized overnight. Desktop cleaned. Old drafts deleted. Processes streamlined in ways I hadn't approved but couldn't argue with. My productivity metrics improved dramatically. Management praised me. I felt sick. One morning, I found a document on my desktop titled Continuity. It listed my daily routine in detail. Arrival time, break habits, bathroom visits, even the way I angled my monitor to reduce glare in the afternoon. At the bottom, one line stood out. Redundancy not required. I deleted the file. It reappeared the next day. I tried to avoid Aaron. He made that impossible. He would appear near me without warning. In elevators, in stairwells, standing just close enough to remind me he was there. "You don't need to be afraid," he said once casually as we waited for the copier. "Of what?" I asked. "Being replaced," he replied. That night I couldn't log in from home. My credentials didn't work anywhere. VPN. Everything rejected me. At 2:11 a.m. I received a text message. Unknown number. "You can rest tomorrow." The next morning I went to the office anyway. My badge didn't work. Security looked confused. "You're not active," the guard said. "That's a mistake," I said. "I was here yesterday." He checked again. "Your account was deactivated at 9:02 p.m. last night." I knew exactly who had done it. HR met with me briefly. They said there had been an internal review. My role was no longer necessary. They offered severance. As for my badge, I asked about Aaron. No one knew who I met. I left the building shaking. 2 days later, a former coworker texted me. "Hey, weird question. Were you training someone before you left?" I asked why. "Because there's a guy here doing your work," she said. "Knows everything you used to do. Even uses your shortcuts." She sent a photo. It was Aaron, sitting at my old desk, using my computer. I reported everything to corporate, to IT security, to anyone who would listen. No response. Weeks passed, then months. One night, I logged into LinkedIn out of habit. My profile showed currently employed. Job title unchanged. Company unchanged. Activity timestamped that day. I tried to edit it. Access denied. An hour later, I got an email. Subject, "Please don't." No sender. Just text. "You're archived." That's enough. The next morning, my former coworker messaged me again. "They reassigned your email," she said. "It's still active." I checked. My old work address responded. Auto reply. "I'm here." I don't know how long Aaron had been there before I noticed him. I don't know if he was ever a temp or a person or something built into the system itself. I only know this. The company never hired a replacement for me, because according to their records, I never left.